because I did actually sit around and prepare some stuff for all of you guys, so it will be interesting. Now, the three books that I decided to select for our kind of discussion or as roadmap all have information that helps explain the situation that we got ourselves into. Because if we're just seeing what's happening, it is mind-boggling. It makes absolutely no sense, no rational sense. Where did all this hate come from? Why now? Why us? Why here in the United States? So let's do that. And I prepared some stuff where I copied some information. I did some research just to make sure historical facts are correct. And I used the information from the book Why the Jews by Dennis Prager. He's a famous talk host, writer, Christian, and the rabbi Joseph Telushkin, to use that as our roadmap. So let's see. I like to begin with the famous words often quoted by my grandfather Isaac, and that's in Hebrew, Im ein ani li mili, and it goes on. It's from Proverbs, or in the wisdom of the fathers, and its translation is, if I'm not for myself, no one would be for me. If I'm only for myself, then who am I? And if not now, then when? So I think this is really very actual, specifically to us right now. It's kind of like we need to educate ourselves before we can educate our children, kind of like on the airplane with the masks. And then if we're not going to do it now, then we're going to be left without air. We're going to be left without an identity. So the goal of the book club for us as a group was to help ourselves, our community, and do it now. We're definitely woefully uninformed to battle the misinformation propaganda waged against our identity as Jews, as Zionists, and as humans. On one hand, they claim we are not a race, so they are not racist. And yet on the other hand, they want, like the Nazis, to murder any Jew. Like they ask on the streets, are you a Jew, to our children? What are they supposed to answer? As my oldest son Samuel, you guys know him, says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it surely rhymes. So the idea was that each week we could discuss a different section of the book, and hopefully we can finish the first book, Why the Jews, either audiobook or on PDF. You guys can get it for free if you want, or I can send it to you. So the chapter that I wanted to begin with is straight to the point, to the meat of it. It's chapter 14 in that book, and it says 8 lies they tell about Israel. But before we begin, just wanted to get a little background here of some history, as you guys said. So the question is, 1938 all over again? Now, why are we saying 1938? Do you guys remember what happened in Nazi Germany in 1938?
Yeah, well, basically what I remember, or from learning and seeing in the movies, what we see now is a lot of Jews, they thought, we'll keep quiet, we'll be by ourselves, they're gonna pass, they're not gonna bother us. And they didn't stick together as a whole nation or as one. And when everyone were by themselves, they figured no one's gonna touch us until everyone got touched together. And if they would have stood together as one, they could have caused more resistance, I believe.
You are correct, but the specific event that was the watershed point was actually the November 9th, 10th Kristallnacht.
The Kristallnacht. Huh?
Exactly. And what was the excuse for the Kristallnacht? Do you guys remember what was the excuse? I again looked it up, so I'm current. Anybody remembers? So the excuse was a 17-year-old German-born Polish Jew who shot and killed a German diplomat in Paris on November 7, 1938. He did that because Germany removed the passports and was throwing out a lot of the Jews from Germany, but Poland didn't want to take them, so they were kind of scared in a no man's land, right between, in the border, in an area they didn't have houses, they didn't have anything, and he wanted attention to that. So he went ahead and he did that. Now, think to yourself, what was the reaction of the Jews? Nothing. Nothing.
Well, I think that it's a common problem throughout history that the Jews are either warned that something is coming and they take no action, or that they are experiencing, they're living through a situation that is showing them, hey, you are not okay, you are in danger, something will happen, and we still don't heed the warnings even as we live through it. And I think that that's been a repetitive notion in history for the Jewish people over and over again.
Yeah, I agree with you. The question is, how did we get there, and how can we prevent that from ever, as we say, never again? Now, look what happened to Israel, right? If we're trying to compare the German reaction, everybody said, Germans are civilized. The Palestinian people especially most of them consider the Germans to be heroes. Most of their leaders affiliated with the Nazis, they only changed affiliation in 1945 when they saw that they're losing, because they want to be part of the United Nations. They were given an offer to be part of the United Nations. So think about 1,400 Jews were massacred, babies. And what was the Israeli reaction? Did they go and do pogrom, Kristallnacht, on Muslim shops? No, they didn't do that. So you kind of think to yourself, oh my God, the Zionist killers. Well, I don't see that. So when they're looking at those comparisons, they don't even care to look at it. They just care to find anything that they could blame us. Even when we were the ones who suffered. We were the ones who were murdered inhumanely, disgustingly. I mean, you can't find words to that. We were the ones who were being blamed for that. It's Anyway. So the issue is, it didn't start like that. It started in 1933 when Hitler was just chosen as a counselor, and then they started under the guise of improving the education, and that's when they started putting quotas on Jews. The Jews were not allowed to be more than 5% of the Jews were not allowed to be in schools. And then slowly it went into Nuremberg laws in 1935 when they said you can't... they basically actually took many of the rules that were in medieval Christianity, where Jews had to live separate. They were not allowed to be on the streets on German holidays. Same thing was rules that were done in Christian world before that. They had to wear the yellow badge, which... came actually from the Muslims in 807 AD. The Muslims put a rule on Jews that they had to wear a yellow belt, and women had to wear one black and one red shoe and a conical hat. So this was taken from them, from the Muslims. So even though we say that during the Muslim times Jews lived well, they actually did not live well over there. Despite not living well, they survived and prospered. And there were very short periods of time when Jews were in high positions, like in the golden time in Spain, before the Almohad Empire that came from Morocco and conquered them and basically offered them either conversion or death. In the late 10th and 11th century. So this is basically what happened. So let's move on. What happened with the rest of the world? If we were going by the Rabbi Hillel's words, Im ein ani li mili, if I'm not for myself, who's going to be for me? So in 1944, there was a rabbi by the name of Dov Weissmandel. He was an Orthodox rabbi from Czechoslovakia. He escaped while en route to a concentration camp and ultimately met with the papal nuncio. Papal nuncio is the archbishop in the capacity of a diplomat representing the Vatican. And he described to him the horrors of the Jews in temporary camps awaiting deportation to Auschwitz. He begged the papal nuncio to intervene with his ex-secretary, who was the Father Joseph Tiso. Father Joseph Tiso was a priest that became the prime minister of Slovakia. It separated from Czechoslovakia with the help of Germany. And what do you think the papal nuncio answered? So, I mean, you think about Jesus Christ, everybody should be loved, right? What did he answer to him? This being a Sunday is a holy day for us. Neither I nor Father Tiso occupy ourselves with profane matters on this day. Weissmandel persisted, arguing that the lives of innocent human beings, including infants and children, were not a profane matter. The papal nuncio responded, "There is no innocent blood of Jewish children in the world. All Jewish blood is guilty. You have to die. This is the punishment that has been awaiting you because of that sin," meaning the death of Jesus. So you say, that's only in the Catholic representative. But in the country of eternal brotherhood, equality, freedom, like in France, right? The revolution in 1791. Liberté, égalité, fraternité, that shouldn't happen, right? Well, when the Germans came there, they asked the Vichy government to give them the people from the age of 16 to 40 that were Jews. They didn't have the manpower to do it themselves. So what they do? They complied. But they complied in a way that shows that they complied even more than that. They gave them 4,051 Jewish children under the age of 16. Under the age of 16, the Germans didn't even ask for that. And those children were subsequently sent into Auschwitz. So strong was the German hostility to Jewish peoplehood. By the way, Hitler said himself, this was in letters that I read, described, that he knew that racism, that race, Jews is really not a race, but he needed it for the credibility to make it sound more scientific. But the idea was already done before. So already in the 1870s, the entire idea of Semites, antisemitism, that word was created by the Germans. And they were so afraid of that, of the idea that they would claim that they are not true Germans, that they even didn't help their own Jews. And this is an example. Many German Jews decided to drop the national component of Judaism and to identify themselves as Germans of the Mosaic persuasion, meaning Mosaic like Moses persuasion. Jews whose one and only national identity was German. Many Jews so feared accusations of dual loyalties, which is the same thing that Jews are being accused and will be accused in the United States, and were accused in the United States way before. One of the most famous Jews that was accused was Justice Brandeis. And Justice Brandeis, by the way, he's a Harvard graduate, was the first U.S. Supreme Court nominee by President Wilson. And he was an ardent Zionist, and he said that there is no contradiction, there is no reason why there should be a contradiction between being a Zionist and being an American patriot. And if anyone wants to ask why, which is fine, we can discuss why that is. What he explained, how he explained it. So anyway, they were so worried about being accused of dual loyalties that in 1840, during the most important 19th century time when the Jews were accused of a blood libel in Damascus, Syria, the leader of Reform Judaism in Germany, Abraham Geiger, very, very famous rabbi, opposed the intervention of the world Jewry on behalf of the Jews in Damascus. They said, that's not our problem. Well, we see how it helped them. Another instance we know is the Zionist Congress. The Zionist Congress was supposed to be held in Munich, Germany. But it wasn't held there because the Jewish population there was worried that they would be perceived as supporting the Zionist cause. And so they went to do it in Basel. And this is, 1898, right? I think 1898 it was, first Zionist Congress. Can't recall right now. Anyway, 97, 98, I can't remember for sure. But the point is, it was before even the Hitler coming to power. And it obviously didn't help them. Well, let's move a little further quickly on. In 1972, the Socialist Workers' Party paper, The Militant, criticized the Palestinian terrorist murder of 11 Israeli athletes in the Munich Olympics. That was in 1972. You remember Black September. But only on the ground that it made the criminal, meaning the Jews, look like the victims. They also said that the major task confronting American revolutionaries, as regarding to the Middle East, remains that of educating the radicalization of the youth for destruction of the state of Israel. This is in the United States, 1972. The Communist Party, USA, concedes Israel right to exist, but said Zionism is, in its very essence, a racist ideology. It sets the Jewish people apart as a special people, a chosen people, if you will, a superior people in Israel. The Zionist rulers have created a racist state. So we'll go through this just so you guys can see what ideology have been going on, and this is since the 1970s. We're waking up a little bit late because we were in a society that's democratic. We didn't hear that, but it was bubbling underneath those currents, and now that hate looks like it's coming from nowhere, but it did not come from nowhere. It was slowly seeping into the academia and into the mind of the students. And unfortunately also to our children, that we prepare them with educating them so that they can get into the best universities, giving them tutors, math, English, etc. One thing we forget to educate them is about their Jewish heritage. So I think that to understand the mind of our haters, we need to see their claims and how over a millennia it has been spinned. For example, an Academy Award winning actress, Vanessa Redgrave, don't know her, but a member of the Central Committee of the British Workers' Revolutionary Party, Trotsky Communist organization, made a propaganda film for the PLO in the 1970s, at a time when the PLO was officially committed to Israel's destruction. In it, she was making a sensuous dance with a PLO machine gun, under the guise of only attacking Zionists and Zionism. The film uses the Arabic word for Jew, Yahud, but the English subtitle speaks of Zionists. So again, you have them already back then having dual messages. Same thing like they're doing right now. In English, they'll say one thing, and in Arabic, their language will say another. And the problem also happens is that I saw in another book called Catch the Jew by Tuvia Tenenbom, who speaks fluent Arabic, German, Hebrew, English, is that many of the leading Jewish journalists, they don't speak Arabic, so they are dependent on a translator. And when they're dependent on the translator, you know how it is. It's basically depends on what the translator decides to translate. So they have two different languages they speak, you can say. One to the Western world, another one to their own people. Right. And then over there, she's basically asking, one of the clips is she's asking a girl, what would you do if a Jewish soldier tried to kill you? Kind of bringing what has become a very common story spread by the Palestinians in the West Bank by Arafat, by the PLO and other Arab nations, that the Jews drink Arab blood. And that started actually in the 1840 Damascus libel. That's when they transported that blood libel. And actually it was started by the French diplomat who probably most likely is the one who killed the Coptic monk and then said that it must be the Jews that did that. And then they took a Jew, tortured him, and the torture he admitted. They took some other Jews and tortured them too, until Moses Montefiore from England came in and started fighting for them, and then some other prominent Jews started fighting and made sure that they were, whoever was still alive and barely living was released. But that after that never left the Arab world. So let's go through some of the lies. Here are some of the lies. So lie number one that they claim: Israel is the cause of Middle East tensions because its refusal to make compromises for peace. So if you guys are being told that information, do you feel that you have enough knowledge that you can answer that claim? Ilan, anybody? Hi, Sophie.
Personally, no, I don't think that I would be able to engage, at least meaningfully in a conversation like that.
All right. So I would say that despite my knowledge on the subject, because it's something that I don't do all the time, kind of like any other thing, it wouldn't be easy for me to discuss the details of that, even though I know the general picture. So I brought it in points for you guys. So here we go. After 1967 victory of Israel offered to give most of the conquered land in the war of self-defense. The Arab world responded to this offer in September of 1967 with the famous three no's of Khartoum: no peace with, no negotiations with, and no recognition of Israel. As Israeli Foreign Minister Abba Eban commented, this is the first war in history which has ended with the victors suing for peace and the vanquished calling for unconditional surrender. You hear this complete irrationality? You guys see it? Anyway, to me, I think this is just mind blowing. But the way Abba Evan, in Hebrew, Evan is a stone. The way he said it is remarkable. Anyway, he wanted to be the prime minister, but Golda Meir said to him, "No luck for you." She didn't think he's got the spine to be a good prime minister, and she was right. He was very smart, but wouldn't have been a good prime minister. So another example, just to have a diplomatic relationship with Egypt, Israel gave back the Sinai Desert on March 26, 1979. In the 1978 were the Camp David Accords with President Carter. So Egypt did not want Gaza, and at first begging the Prime Minister of Israel was insistent on that and did not want to give them back the Sinai without giving them the Gaza. As a matter of fact, Israel did not even want to go into Gaza because they didn't want Gaza. In 1973, when the Egyptians attacked and they had Gaza under them, they didn't even want to go and through Gaza because they didn't want to have that issue again. I don't know if you guys saw the movie, but they're talking about that in the movie a little bit. So they offered Gaza to Egypt, and they didn't want to take it. Thus, Israel, under the leadership of the right-wing Prime Minister Menachem Begin, returned the Sinai in its entirety. That territory alone, 3 times as large as Israel. So when they say we're occupiers or we're land grabbers or whatever it is, right? Made up 91% of the land the Jewish state had captured in the 6-day war. Israel also gave up the oil fields it had developed in Sinai, which would have saved Israel billions of dollars each year on oil and enabled it to become largely energy independent. When I was in Israel, I remember that. So let's see, I was born 71, so I was 8 years old. I remember in front of the TV sitting and watching how they were evicting the settlement of Yamit, a beautiful settlement. They were planning to make it into houses of 200,000. It was right on the, Yamit means like Yam, but smaller, Yamit. And it was right on the Mediterranean Sea. Gorgeous settlements that they created there, right on the desert. And think about it, it was a very, very short period of time they had, right? From 67 to 79. And I mean, you can watch the picture. This was the first time when Israeli government would remove their own people who settled in an area for peace. And when you think to yourself of the claim that the Jews are genocidal, or the Jews are trying to clear their country from any Arabs, it's the other way around. They did not want any Jews in that area, even though those Jews were peaceful Jews. It wasn't an army. They actually improved it. The Sharm el-Sheikh was a shambles until Israel came. And when Israel conquered the Sinai, they made Sharm el-Sheikh like a tourist place. Everybody wanted to go and visit that place. And then they gave all the hotels, everything that they built, they gave it over to the Egyptians. So, when you talk about that, you realize they gave the oil fields, they removed their own people from Yamit. It was, at that time, was a population of 6,000. They removed all of them from the territory just in order to get recognition of peace. And the peace was not a good peace, but as we say, it's better a bad peace than a good war, because there's no good war. All right, so that's on the one side. Obviously, we did the same thing with the Jordanians, and the Jordanians are kind of, you can say, in official control of part of Jerusalem where the Dome of the Rock is. We'll talk about that later. So let's go about what happened with the Palestinians, and we'll talk about that a little bit more also later. In Camp David, in the summer of 2000, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak offered Palestinian Authority Chairman Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian more than 95% of the West Bank and part of Israel proper to make up for the percentage of the West Bank it was not returning, because there were already huge populations of Jews living in some of those areas, so that they can establish a Palestinian state. What did Arafat do, guys? Anybody remembers?
He said no.
Sophie, 100%. Arafat not only said no, not only rejected the offer, he then launched the second intifada, during which the Jews of Israel, civilians especially, were targeted for death by homicide bombers. So this is the facts. So reviewing it again, okay? 1967, Israel offered. They replied with 3 no's. No recognition, no peace, no negotiations. Egypt, it gave all of the Sinai, offered even Gaza. They didn't want Gaza. It gave them the oil field it itself developed that would have made it energy independent. Have you ever seen that? I mean, when the United States fought with Mexico, the Mexican-United States war, they didn't give anything back. And why? It was about the Alamo, right? Remember, guys? They came in, they massacred the people, and the Alamo was kind of like on a territory that was questionable whether it was really American or, Mexico. And they went ahead and they retaliated and went into Mexico City, into the capital, and took over, and then sued for peace. And then they said, we'll give you money for this territory, and they forced them to take the money, and they took California, they took Texas. So this was how the United States did that. What is Israel doing? Just for them to give peace. And who is the stronger? Israel is the stronger. And yet, it gave the land to Egypt in a war that it actually was of self-defense, right? It wasn't the one started the war in 1967. They actually wanted to throw us into into the water, into the ocean, into the sea, whatever. All right, so line number 2. Israel doesn't need that much area for security. So a lot of times Israel's land, I hear, is compared to the state of New Jersey. So I decided to go ahead and check out how those two states compare. Well, I know that Israel is more a sliver, a thin sliver, which obviously makes it divide and conquer option much easier for any country trying to invade it, as opposed to when it's a little bit like a pie, like a circle, or a little more shaped like New Jersey. Still, New Jersey is larger, 1.02 times bigger than Israel in terms of territory, not to talk that it's a little bit wider as well. How about its comparison to other Arab countries? All right, so there's a small Israel country, and then there is a big Arab country. What's the sizes? So check that out. Israel occupies less than 1/600th, which is mean 0.00016% of the land occupied by the 21 Arab states. What about Jordan itself compared to Israel? Right? If you remember the British mandate that the League of Nations, which was created by the idea of Wilson, that was his baby pet. Because of it, he was willing to actually abandon his promise to Germany, because he told them, if you guys will go ahead and agree for armistice, for peace, right? In the 11th hour, 11th month, right? On the 11th day, 1918, if you'll agree to the armistice, you will have your independence, but you have to have a democratic Republic of Weimar, right? And they agreed to his ideals. He was the president of Cornell University, right? A brilliant mind, right? Well, not a very practical mind. And unfortunately, that League of Nations failed. And what he did was very onerous pressures on Germany that eventually led to economic problems, which allowed Hitler to surface up, promising improvement in economy. So during the League of Nations, returning back to Britain, they had gotten it in order to make a state for the Jews. That was the Balfour Declaration, that they will make a state for the Jews, 1917. The Balfour Declaration. It was given to the head of the Zionism at that time, Rothschild. He was saying to him, here it is. And when he, by the way, on his deathbed, he told his daughter, and she said that the one thing that he was proud of most of all during all his time as a prime minister, foreign minister, was actually the fact that he did that declaration that said that the British are committed to creating a state for the Jews in the land in Palestine. And so when they did get that land, they ended up giving a big chunk to Jordan and creating a king over there, which they could, control. And they did. They did the same thing with other countries, like in Africa and other places. They basically divide and conquer. So they took the Turkish Ottoman Empire that ruled all that territory, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, and divided that. And they gave them. So in terms of the landmass of Jordan compared to Israel, right? And Jordan is really, if you can say, a Palestinian people, these are the people who need to be over there. They should be the one taking them. Jordan is about 4.1 times bigger than Israel, okay? That's its willingness, Israel's willingness to cede more than 97% of the land it captured in a war of self-defense. It's truly remarkable and unparalleled in history. Never in history anything like that happened. Going a little further back in history, in 1869, Mark Twain, after a visit to the Holy Land, wrote, "The word Palestine always brought to my mind a vague suggestion of a country as large as the United States. I could not conceive of a small country having so large a history." And so that brings us to the third lie over here, or claim. Israel stole the land from the Palestinians. So we hear that that claim all the time. And again, we will talk about what is considered a refugee and how they changed, the UN changed the definition of a refugee, which increased the number of people they would consider as refugees. But we will still follow that definition, which was anybody who's been in that country for 2 years or more. And you'll see most of the people actually did not own land. 71% of them did not own land, and most of them came later during the British Mandate and were increasing population, specifically in Jewish areas, because the Jews improved the economy. So you will see the numbers like 226% in Jaffa, in Haifa, in all those areas increased because of the Jews improving the economy over there. So they came for work. So anyway, let's read based on the book parts that I organized for you guys. So Israel stole the land from the Palestinians. That's another claim. In the more than 3,000-year-long history of the land of Israel, so about 3,500 years. So right, so the Jews left Egypt in about 1300 BCE. Around 1250 BCE, somewhere there they entered the land of Canaan, and that's when they went ahead and conquered it with Joshua. They went first Jordan, and then 2.5 tribes remained in the Jordan area, and the others went across the Jordan River and conquered the rest of the land, except a small thin strip by the sea that were being held by very warlike people who were the Philistines. Got nothing to do with the Palestinians, nothing to do, except that Hadrian wanted to punish the Jews and therefore took that name of the arch enemy of the Jews and called the land in that name after he was very upset following the fourth revolt of the Jews that was really very painful to the Romans. So it started over there in 1250. They come to Canaan, and then you have King David. You have King Saul and then King David that rule over Israel, and for more than four centuries. So Jewish state established in the aftermath of the Jewish exodus from Egypt, and later ruled for more than 4 centuries by King David and his descendants. The Commonwealth established during the Second Temple and destroyed by the Romans in 135 CE, right? So that was the last revolt by Bar Kokhba, where Rabbi Akiva is there also. And the modern state of Israel was established in 1948. So throughout history, there had always been smaller Jewish migrations to the geographic area known as Palestine, since the Jews never relinquished their claim to Israel, even after being forcibly removed. The area of Palestine was regarded by its Turkish rulers and by its Arab residents as part of Syria, southern Syria to be precise. Even after Israel's creation, Ahmed Shukeri was the founding head of the PLO and Arafat's predecessor, told the UN Secretary Council in 1956, it is common knowledge that Palestine is nothing but southern Syria, right? So, right, they didn't have that. So the entire propaganda idea was actually created by Russia, by the KGB, of making a people called the Palestinian people. He helped the Grand Mufti, by the way, just a little story about the head of the PLO, right? He helped the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem assassinate more than 3,000 moderate Arabs. Why nobody talks about that? He's the one who assassinated even his own brother, who was a physician. At the age of 29, he assassinated him. He called him out, "Oh, come out, your wife is sick, is not feeling well." And he came out, and then he assassinated him because he was moderate. And then 18,000 Arabs fled the land, fled Israel because of that. All right, line number 4. Did you guys follow what I said?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not too much all over the place. Please, I need you guys to tell me.
No, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is very good.
All right, good. Line number 4. There were millions of Arabs in Israel before the large Jewish migration in the mid-19th century. Well, let's look at the facts. In the late 19th century, at the time of the rise of Zionism, the Arab population in Palestine was under 250,000. And the great majority of the Arab population were comparatively newcomers, either late immigrants or descendants of persons who had immigrated into Palestine in the previous 70 years. Furthermore, few of the 250,000 residents were landowners. 80% of the Arab living in Palestine were debt-ridden peasants, semi-nomads, and Bedouins. 80%. So just quick math, 250,000, 80%. What does that make? Anybody with a calculator? All right, so about 50,000, something like that. 50,000 were actually landowners. 80%, right? Is that something correct? Less than 50,000 were basically landowners. And most of them were nomads or semi-nomads. Turkey held ownership of about 72% of the land. Most of the rest was owned by absentee landlords who lived in Cairo, Damascus, and Beirut. Sovereignty over the land was transferred to England after Turkey's defeat in World War I, and ownership passed to Israel under international law when it became a state in 1948. Of the remaining land, 8.6% was owned by Jews, 3.3% by Arabs who lived in Israel, and 16.5% by Arabs who had left the country. So only 3.3% was owned by Arabs, okay? And many of those 16.5% left much earlier, before the establishment of Israel. The land that the Jews had acquired prior to 1948 war was purchased often at exorbitant prices. Some of the stories that you would hear, they would not only have to purchase it from the absentee landlords, but then they felt bad, so they would come to those people who were pasturing with their sheep, or who were kind of the fedayeen working the land over there, and they would pay them also. Even though they really didn't own the land and didn't have to pay them, they paid them as well because they felt bad. I mean, you know, mostly Russian, Western immigrants, and they wanted to make sure that they helped those people as well. So they paid them as well, an exorbitant, insane amount of money. So $1,100 at that time, right? Dollars an acre in Palestine, mostly for arid and semi-arid land. In the same year, rich black soil in Iowa was selling for about $110. $110 an acre in Iowa, okay? These purchases were made mainly from large land owners, including the Arab mayors of Jerusalem, Gaza City, and Jaffa. Then when land was partitioned by the UN, Israel accepted that partition, but the Arabs did not. 7 Arab countries attacked Israel on May 14, 1948, the day it announced its independence. By the way, Truman told Israel, and also the general of the army, the head commander of the United States, told Israel not to announce its independence because they were worried that Israel will be obliterated. But, you know, 1% of the Jews did die during that time, and it was a big proportion of what was at that time, if I remember correctly, around 580,000 Jews. So it was a huge number for Israel, for the Jews. So anyway, so 7 Arab countries attacked Israel on May 14, 1948. It was the Palestinians and several Arab countries that tried, by destroying the Jewish state, to steal the land from the Jews, and not the Jews trying to steal the land from the Arabs. All right, line number 5. So again, the question about who's stealing land from who, basically we can easily say 1948, the world made some kind of decision. Jews agreed for the partition, Arabs did not agree for the partition. Arabs fought, Arabs lost. Arabs unhappy, they want everything back again, from the river to the sea. Sorry, I don't know which world you live in. In no world does this ever make any sense. So you know, live in your alternate reality. But this is not our reality. 0.0016% of the entire Arab population, and they have same language. Many of them same language, same culture, a lot of similarities, and they don't want to take them. And we'll discuss later why. Line number 6. Israel has a moral obligation to allow the Palestinian refugees who fled in 1948 and their descendants to return to Israel. So that's another thing that I've had people on Instagram tell me. It's like, yeah, Hamas is bad, but why not take all the refugees? There are millions of refugees, you need to take them back. So again, this is in no way can you define those people and their descendants as refugees. But we'll move to that soon. So the objective of those who wish to see Arab refugees and their several million descendants go and live in Israel, the objective is to destroy Israel. This often stated explanation offered by Arab leaders themselves for over half a century. So it's not something that we're just saying, they are saying it themselves. In October 1949, just a year after Israel's creation, Egyptian Foreign Minister Salah ad-Din said, "It is well known and understood that the Arabs, in demanding the return of the refugees to Palestine, mean the return as masters of the homelands and not as slaves. With a greater clarity, they mean the liquidation of Israel." This is quoted. 8 years later, 1957, Arab Refugee Conference in Homs, Syria, passed a resolution stating, "Any discussion aimed at a solution to the Palestinian problem which will not be based on ensuring the refugees' right to annihilate," that's the wording, annihilate Israel, "will be regarded as a desecration of the Arab people and an act of treason." You wonder why Arafat did not accept the 2000 agreement? That's why. 4 years later, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt's president, declared September 1st, 1961, "If the refugees return to Israel, Israel will cease to exist." So basically when they're saying, oh, just let them in, it's basically a Trojan horse, worse than a Trojan horse. They're talking about millions of people coming in, changing this democratic state. I mean, we can see what happens in other cities, in other countries. The people coming in, unfortunately, are not people who are moderate. They're people who have been brainwashed and have a very radical understanding of Islam, and their goal is simply to murder the Jews. They don't believe that they're even humans. I mean, you can see, if they thought that they were humans, how could they have, baked babies in the ovens? I mean, how could they have cut women's bellies and ripped them out? I mean, anyway. All right. The Arab world, with the exception of Jordan, during the entire time when they're talking about all poor refugees, right, refused to allow Palestinian refugees to become citizens at any Arab countries. By the way, talking about that, the King Hussein of Jordan was the one who, on September 1970, murdered 4,000 Palestinians and 600 Syrians and expelled them out. And that's when they went to Beirut, at that time considered the Paris of the Middle East. And we know what happened to Beirut. We see how it looks right now. Used to have 50-50 Arab Christian population. Then they started killing the Christian population there. And then they took over the government, and you have a terrorist state over there. Proxy of Syria. So, where are we? Yes. Driven by its hatred of Israel, the Arab world had a policy of keeping these people, these refugees, homeless and in the refugee camps. Otherwise, this problem would have been solved long ago. As Dr. Elfan Rees, an advisor on refugees to the World Council of Churches, noted, the Arab refugees problem is by far the easiest post-war refugee problem. By faith, by language, by race, and by social organization, they are indistinguishable from the fellows of the host country. In a surprisingly direct statement by UN Representative Ralph Garraway, the former director of UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, said in August 1958, the Arab states want to keep the refugee problem as an open sore, as an affront to the United Nations, and as a weapon against Israel. Arab leaders don't give a damn whether the refugees leave or die. And we can clearly see that as well right now by how they're behaving towards their own people. I don't know if you guys saw the video, I posted it, where this woman is crying and blaming Hamas for the murder of their children. And they're, shutting her mouth down. It's harder for them now to do all this show Bollywood. So some truths are starting to come out. The Arab states created the refugee crisis by imposing a war on Israel. Had the Arabs not launched this war in 1948 or simply treated Palestinians as human beings deserving of homes and citizenship, there would be no refugee crisis. Then or today. It's hard to imagine why Israel should be expected to pay for the consequences of a war that others launched against it more than 50 years ago. Nonetheless, Israel has offered to help resolve the refugees' plight in cooperation with Palestinian and Arab communities, which have refused to explore a solution. How do we put it to people in perspective if they say, okay, but still the refugees should return? In a 1967 editorial, the New York Times noted the naivete of such an argument. The readmission of the refugees would be the equivalent to the admission to the US of nearly 70 million sworn enemies of the nation. The Times argument brings to mind an episode from American history. In the early 1780s, Benjamin Franklin was negotiating an end to the Revolutionary War when British diplomats suddenly issued a demand that the US takes back individuals who had supported England in its war against the colonies. Franklin responded, "Your ministers require that we should receive again into our bosom those who have been our bitterest enemies and restore their properties, who have destroyed ours, and this while the wounds they have given us are still bleeding?" That's the answer any rational person would give. Okay. How is a Palestinian refugee defined? Many believe the Palestinian Arab refugees lived in Israel for centuries. The UN, under Arab prodding, defined Palestinian refugees in a manner unlike its definition of every other refugee group. They define it as any Arab living in Palestine for 2 years prior to 1948 could qualify as a refugee. So he could be there a month, he could be there 2 months. He didn't have there to be for 2 years, for 3 years, he didn't have. Those are called usually migrant workers, okay? They're not called refugees. All right? So, many of these so-called refugees had not lived in Palestine for generations, but had just migrated there, often to take advantage of the prosperity generated in Palestine by the Jews. That is why during the period of the British Mandate, 1917 to 48, well, it should be 1918 really, that's when the war was ended, the Arab population gains were primarily in Jewish areas of residency. Example, 216% in Haifa, 134% in Yafo, and not in Arab areas. Example, only 40% increase in Jenin and 32% increase in Bethlehem. In addition, these refugees, by and large, were not chased out by Israel. Some were, but chose to leave, calculating that Arab armies would quickly destroy Israel, and that since it would be dangerous to be there while fighting was going on, they would return once Israel was defeated. By the way, Ben Gurion, as Sophia, you said yourself, offered and begged them, please stay, be with us. We do not want to push you out. We will build a country together. This was the entire premise of the Israel Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Similar like in the United States. It doesn't matter your religion, your faith, your race. The United States didn't follow that fully. Fortunately, even though the intentions were good, and the South, was treating blacks for a long time as slaves, despite trying to change that. They were hoping it will change in 20 years, but it kept pushing back, and the South kept being dependent on slave work. But Israel, when they did that, there were no slaves, and they did not want to push the Arabs out. There were areas that were dangerous, that were held by Arabs, and they were an enemy to. They had danger to the existence of Israel, but did not push them out for the most part. In short, yes. In addition, the refugees by and large were not chased by Israel, but chose to leave, calculating the Arab armies would quickly destroy Israel, and since it would be dangerous to be there while the fighting was going on, they would return once Israel was defeated. In short, those who argue that if Israel would allow the refugees to return, the Arab-Israeli conflict would end, are right, only insofar as destroying Israel would end the Israeli-Arab conflict. Another lie. All right, we're coming to the 1 hour, and we're going to end. Palestinians turned to violence against Israel out of desperation. Truth. If the issue was desperation, then why would the Palestinians have turned against Israel after it offered to create a Palestinian state on more than 95% of the West Bank and Gaza? Here's a quote by Mitchell Bard. The inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war is a law that is cited often by the United Nations Resolution 242. So if you go to war and you conquer land, like Germany conquered land, it cannot be part of its land. That's kind of like the rule. But as Mitchell Bard, the author of Myths and Facts, a guide to the Arab-Israeli conflict, points out, obviously this makes sense only when applied to an offensive war. Otherwise, insisting that it is impermissible to acquire territory by war would actually provide an incentive to the aggressor. Aggressors would have little to lose because they would be insured against the main consequence of defeat, which is losing their land. So I know we've come to the hour of our discussion, and just want to hear what you guys thought about it. Anybody still awake?
I liked it. I thought it was very straightforward. It was 8 lies, and then I right away had to debunk it. And you did a great job.
Well, the book did a great job. I just tried to...
Completely agree. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very informative.
Okay.
I think it's very helpful to kind of go through these kinds of things, because I think that these questions, while I don't know if a lot of these questions are going to come up in confrontations or confrontational conversations, maybe amongst Jews it would, but amongst others that are having some disbelief issues, it's definitely very enlightening to be able to participate in the conversation and be able to actually give some sort of factual and evidence-based rebuttals.
Ilan, I agree with you, but I think the issue here is not to wait for the attack to be on the defense, but I think the issue is to provide education, not propaganda, but actually to educate ourselves so we can educate our children in college, and then they can educate others. A friend of mine was telling me, he's a black belt in martial arts long ago, but he was in the city, I think it was Wednesday, in Columbus Circle, and he saw some Palestinian people trying to tell their version of the situation, to so-called educate people in the neighborhood. And he came over and he started asking them, "Can you tell me what nonsense are you talking about?" He says, and he starts saying, "I'm gonna kick your butt. Kind of, like, he got a little bit upset when he heard all the lies that they were saying. And he said that they just, folded and ran away. So they, instead of confronting and having their lies debunked, having a discussion, they ran away. But the issue that we have to do is we have to make sure that, people are busy. They don't have time, unfortunately, to do most of the time the research. They get their information maybe from an Instagram tweet or from videos they see. Oh, they're all tearing it. Let's gang up and tear it. Also, those posters of the poor hostages. I mean, they don't tear pictures of dogs that are lost, but I guess Jewish lives are not as important as a lost puppy. So, we need to make sure that we go on the offensive in a positive way and provide education.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I agree as well. The big problem is, I don't know, maybe you know the answer to it or something to think about. A lot of Jewish people own the media, but at the same time, we are losing the information war.
I don't know about owning the media. They may be paying money to media, but they definitely don't own. They give it complete freedom. One of the examples is when you look at some of the donors to the Harvard or UPenn or whatever, they give them donations. They don't own anything. The entire idea of the protocols of the elders of Zion or the propaganda created by the KGB, that's nonsense. They don't own the media. There are Jews there. There are some who own some media, but they give them free reign. And unfortunately, most of them are, even if they are Jews there, just like they are in Israel.
A lot, if you check the major media channels are owned by the Jews, and they give them free reign, like you said, but it's totally wrong because we're losing the media war.
Well, but they don't. You see, I agree.
It's not like so simple because some of these CEOs might be Jewish, but these are like major conglomerates that have thousands of employees, and there's so many different chains of command that happen. So it's like the CEO can't just come in and say, hey, we have to be like, spitting only facts about the Jewish people and blah, blah, blah. Like they cannot show their own narrative because they have to stay within of their position.
Go ahead,
Also, we can't make an assumption that because somebody is a Jew, they totally support Israel. You see so many, unfortunately, Jews in schools and universities that say, I'm Jewish, and what Israel is or doing is horrible, and Palestinians need a state, and this and that, right? Just because somebody's Jew, it doesn't automatically mean they support Israel and know the history well.
Absolutely. I mean, half the Jews in Hollywood don't even support Israel, and then sadly, Hollywood is actually owned by the Jews for the most part.
So I would be careful of saying things like that for a number of reasons. But I think the issue is here another factor. The head of the NSA, actually, I read a book about him. He was Jewish, the father of the NSA, and he was married to a Christian. Anyway, he made one time, and he made safes. He broke the Japanese counter for the Enigma. He broke their code. He just couldn't understand what the message was, but he broke the code, and for that he was very depressed because he kind of got the message that they're doing an attack, but he couldn't understand where, because of the language that they used. But he broke their code. He knew that there will be an attack. He didn't know it would be on Pearl Harbor. But he once made a very difficult safe combination to a very rich person who offered him a lot of money, and then he didn't pay him. And his wife is like, "Why don't you go get the money?" He's like, "Well, all people say the Jews are all about money. They want money, and I don't want that stereotype to be propagated." So, because I think Jews are also afraid of the claim that they own stuff or they control stuff, they go even worse. It's kind of like when you see some of the politicians that are Jewish, like Schumer or other politicians, except thank God we have Ina Vernikov. They are afraid that someone will claim that they have a dual loyalty, or that they will stand for a Jew. They're very often the worst for the Jewish people. So I think there are a few factors that are standing in the way of some of those owners to make sure that they control the media that they own. One of them is exactly that lie that Jews control everything, and because of that, those 300 Jews are deciding everything what will happen in the world. And the other is, you're right, some of them don't want to be associated with Israel because they believe Jews are a religion and not a nationality, which is another fallacy, because everyone, even AI, I was asking AI about that question, says that in all Jewish literature, it is well known that Jews are a nationality, a religion, and a Bible. So there is, Jews, God, nationality, God, and the Bible. All those three things are the pillars of Judaism, and you cannot take any one of them out. It's kind of like saying to you, well, you are gay. We love gays, and this is an example that was given in one of the book reviews that I was with Yelena, sponsored by JPA, famous author. She wrote Everybody Loves Dead Jews, Dara Horn, and she said it's kind of like saying that we love gay, but please don't bring your gay partner anytime with you. We don't want to see you and your gay partner. This is part of him. This is part of the being Jewish, is Zionism. So you cannot remove that and still be Jewish. And we see what that helped the German Jews. It definitely didn't help them. Right? They murdered them.
Yeah. Just to be respectful of time, I think Daniel has a question. Daniel, do you have a question? You raise your hand.
Yes. Hi. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for in front of me, by the way.
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm looking at this groups of people, right? So I work in a city, in a company with a lot of educated, smart Americans who understand what's going on in the world. They may not know as much about Judaism or Israel to that extent. So I think those are the types of people we can talk to, and I can talk to them at work. Now, I'm looking at the other groups of people. So those that are demonstrating on the streets, I don't think those people can be educated, honestly. I mean, that's not the people who have jobs, who go to, a lot of them don't even go to university. And then you take, so that's kind of like hard to educate those people, right? They just like follow the crowd. They're like a bunch of sheep following, somebody who's screaming loudly that Jews have to be killed or whatever. Free Palestine, right? And then you have the universities, which is a hard one, because, I mean, Qatar has donated $5 billion to Cornell, and my sister went to Cornell. So a lot of our educated young people who are going to the Ivy League schools and other good universities in the country, they're supported by Arab states that do support terrorism in a lot of ways. So it's really hard for universities to really speak out, because a lot of the donors are coming from Middle East, from Arab countries. So it's difficult to kind of maybe change the mentality of those universities, and I think that's where we need to spend our efforts in trying to figure out how to change that. And I think that's a difficult task. So I don't know. I'm just kind of like trying to break up the populations of people that we can try to educate with what you're giving us this information now. So that's kind of like how I'm looking at it.
So Daniel, this is brilliant what you're suggesting. I think you're 100% right. So we don't waste our efforts. There are a few ways one can do that. First of all, obviously, what you said in your work, that's the best, as being an example to the people you work with, who know you already, know your personality, respect you. They'll be much more likely to listen and to pay attention to what you're saying. In terms of the colleges, as I was sharing with you the information, you saw this was happening before Qatar. This was in the 1970s already taking place, annihilation, desire to annihilate Israel here in the United States. And talking about who's controlling, obviously we can see that it's not Jews controlling. If they're giving donations, it's true, they're not controlling. The people who are giving with strings attached are the other countries like Qatar that hosts the head of Hamas hides over there.
But there are powerful Jews also who give a lot of donations because they want their plaques on colleges like Harvard and Cornell. And somehow the message has to get to them that they should stop these donations or make a point until they stop brainwashing the kids of what's going on and all this anti-Semitism on campuses.
I agree with you, but I think, unfortunately, maybe that's why everything is happening now, so that they'll wake up and realize that they cannot hide behind either their donations or behind their worldliness, because they will still be considered dirty Jews. So I think that the way we can do that is kind of like what Yelena, me, and the kids did. Our friend's son came up with an idea that the pumpkins that we got, we will offer for free in response to one question, simple question that should be human answer question, not a complicated one. Should the hostages be freed? Now, once you discuss that, then you can discuss other things, because they're already predisposed, and you leave the questions open-ended questions. And what happened was, which I did not show in the video that we took, it wasn't a professional video, there was difficult with the sound because there was water in the background that we only realized afterwards when we were trying to make the video. I don't know if you guys all saw the pumpkin video. But one of the kids who was over there was, I didn't realize, was actually Jewish. And he said, well, but the Israeli soldiers are murdering Palestinian children. Well, actually, I don't know, but that's what people say. So then I had to explain to him about Israel, about the soldiers, about the IDF, about the rules of engagement. I asked him if he saw the movie American Sniper, and I explained to him that in Israel, it's a democratic state. Every person is responsible for the law, and if a soldier will shoot another person, even if he has a grenade, even if he has a gun, if he will shoot him before that person even took that grenade and was in the process of throwing it, he would be arrested. That soldier will be arrested. So the rules of engagement are even more difficult, more onerous than the ones that are placed on the American soldiers. And more so, one of the captains of combat unit, when he spoke to the soldiers, that was during the, I believe, 2014 Gaza war, told them, God is with us, we are on the right, and God will be on our side. The fact that he used the word God, someone reported him and they removed him from his position. They took him away from the army and removed him from his position. So when you are saying that the Israeli soldiers are shooting Palestinian children, you're obviously being given wrong information. That's why Israel did not carpet bomb, unlike America that carpet bombed Dresden and Germany and the other cities in Germany and Japan. They did that. We, Israel, did not do that because they are concerned about civilian casualties, and they also opened them corridors to go away. And we saw the trucks of Hamas that were blocking it. We also saw what Hamas did, where they removed pipes that were placed for water to make into weapons. We also saw them stealing the fuel that was given to them, to the Palestinian people in Gaza, in order to fuel their machines that were shooting rockets at Israel. Hospitals did not have fuel. I just listened to an overheard conversation of one of the Hamas people talking to one of the doctors, the Palestinian doctors in one of the hospitals. The Hamas took away the oil, the fuel. So the fuel they didn't have in the hospital because they took it to shoot at Israel. So clearly they're not caring about their own civilians. But the Jewish soldiers are. I mean, look, you can always have someone who is in the heat of battle or being very upset, may go ahead and do something. They're not saints, they're humans. And asking more of them would be too much. But they are judged afterwards. Everything is analyzed. So once we talked to him about that, and we talked to him about more, we told him about how the name Palestine even came to be, and that it has nothing to do with the Philistines that were actually seafaring people that came at about the same time that the Jews came into the land of Canaan. He was so grateful. They said, you know what, keep the pumpkin, give it to someone else, because the information I got was more valuable than any pumpkin would be. So it's those kind of dialogues, conversation that you can do when you come perhaps to the college to visit your kids. That would help. Or have the kids do it themselves like they did.
Yeah, and also, you're totally correct about saying it, and I think everyone should try to talk to their peers at work to explain what's going on, because a lot of people see the media, they're brainwashed by the news, by other people. Like yesterday, there were I work in the corporate world, and a couple of Filipino people, they were defending all of this that's going on, and they're against Israel, and they're not Muslim, they're from the Philippines. So I had to explain to them that Israel is fighting a war. It's not against Arabs, it's not against Muslims, it's against these Islam extremist terrorists who declared a jihad. And they had no clue even what the jihad is. And the jihad, I explained, is a war against everyone who's not Muslim, who's not radical Muslim. So I told them, that people don't understand that if something happens to the Jews, they all could be next. And they have to be explained, I guess, this in a nice, rational way. And like you said, if you're respected at work, they'll probably listen to you. No one's going to report you. But people are afraid for some reason to do this.
Well, I'll tell you, at my job, if I was to even give an inkling that I'm for Israel, I'd probably get fired.
What?
Yeah, unfortunately, in my industry, it doesn't. It's not so easy to have these kinds of conversations. Any political agenda that is for Israel or to the right, or swings even moderately right, is immediately shunned upon.
But that's 1 second. That's freedom of speech. As long as you're not saying, look, I understand when people are saying you should murder someone or you should exterminate someone or something like that. That's a different story. But if you're discussing facts and politics, what's wrong? That is not right.
Because you're contributing to the culture of the environment in a negative way, they'll see that as that. And because it's at-will employment, they'll just say you are not a good fit culturally for our organization, and we have to let you go.
What sector are you working in, if you don't mind? I'm just curious.
Sure, I'm in software development.
Oh, same here, yeah. And
so I work with morons, basically, at least in that sphere.
I guess we all do. But
I would not call them that. I would just say that they're in that area. They're not as experienced or maybe as informed in that area. So we all have our strengths and things we care about.
You're right. They're misinformed. It's not that they're informed. They're misinformed, and they have to be told in a nice way. You can't make a big deal about it or a big argument, because then actions might be taken against you. But if you do it in a nice way, they might listen in.
Yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't take the plunge just because I have a feeling that, I mean, definitely like my team, for example, is all like very hardcore liberal. you can imagine like Queers for Palestine type of people.
Ilan,
So,
1 second.
yeah.
1 second.
Yeah, you wanna
I
check
think,
in? I'll
I
buy them
think,
a ticket to
I think,
Palestine.
I think we have already gone over time, and we should probably let people go. Question: how do you guys want to do it the next time, if I can, and then we'll just close it up?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm guessing that we should all get the book.
So that'll be helpful, or audiobook it when you run or workout exercise. Dina?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into this, getting this book, because I really enjoyed it, and actually Thursdays are great for me. Like if you want to meet up on Thursdays.
All right. So let's
Well,
do
I'm curious,
Thursday.
is the book chapter agnostic in the sense that you can kind of read any chapter that you want, but it would still make sense, or is it sequential?
No, it's actually very good. It has separate about anti-Semitism during Christian time, during Islam, left anti-Semitism, the anti-Zionism, hiding its name anti-Zionism, but it's actually anti-Semitism. And all those kind of things, some people saying, well, you can be, I'm not an anti-Semite because I'm an Arab, I'm a Semite. So, and explaining how Hitler was not really saying that he was against anti-Semitism, he was just giving it a legal term, but in fact yes, Sophia, yes, sorry, anti-Jew.
I think it'd also be a great idea if we could like break down the chapters. So, for example, if we all did a separate lie and debunked it, so then it would be more interactive also.
That's actually.
Because I liked when you asked the questions, because then I made sure I was completely following along.
Yeah, I think that's also a great idea. So I would also love it if someone else would want to go ahead and take a chapter. So each of us can take a chapter, and then we can give let's see, however many people we have, each one gives a 5-minute quick review of the pearls, and maybe some notes that could be shared of that. I mean, I can share my notes. There are some spelling errors. I apologize as I was trying to read them. I realized, but I can share my notes too.
I think that's a great idea.
All right, so I'll share my notes, Ilan, to you, and then you can share it with the rest of the people that came in.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for spending
Thank
this
you very
night
much.
with us.
Thank you, y'all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.